Good evening, I'm Roger Bowman. Welcome to this live edition of Plugged Inland. Tonight, we're going to talk about the education crisis in our high schools as part of the American Graduate Project. San Bernardino's Pacific High School faces many challenges. Many families face economic challenges, while some students need to work to help their families. And some students have trouble graduating. Principal Tex Acosta and the team of teachers at Pacific are committed to creating opportunities for students to succeed and to stay in school. These charts show that they are on the right track. Joining us in our studio this evening is Mr. Tex Acosta, the principal of Pacific High School in San Bernardino. Welcome to the show, Tex.
Thank you, Roger. Appreciate it.
Great. Our viewers just saw all of these charts and they show this upward trend. Can you explain what API is?
API is the Academic Performance Index. It's the state indicator by which they measure schools and their performance. Essentially, it's on a scale from 200 to 1,000, and every school every year gives the exam to 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. And depending on their performance, they are given a score on that particular index.
And I understand there's a state goal that's for all high schools across the state.
There is. The state would like every school to eventually be in the 800 zone. If you reach 800, that's kind of the proximal zone where they want you to be. The goals on a yearly basis, though, vary from school to school. The formula for that being you take an 800 minus a base score for the current year, you multiply that times 5%, and that would be the target for that particular school year for that particular school.
So in other words, the annual target isn't necessarily 800, go from wherever you're at to 800. It's make a reasonable improvement each year.
Right, and that's why educators think that the state is a friend of the schools, because they look at you at your beginning point. You have to understand that when you take a group of students in any situation, if you go to athletics and you take an athlete and they begin at a certain place, the first day swimming, they're not going to be doing world times, at the end of the week. But if you've got a seasoned swimmer, you can work with them at a different place. So schools are no different. They realize that we start at different places, and they have a growth model for us and allow flexibility for the schools to make gains, which we in education, I think, for the most part, really enjoy.
Tex, I want to go over so many things this evening. I'd like to talk about the dropout crisis, about what you're doing in your school and the various innovations. We brought you in largely because we think you're in a great position to tell us about struggling schools and about schools that are succeeding, because Pacific has a reputation in the past of being one of those challenged schools. Tell us what it was like at Pacific a few years ago.
Well, a few years ago, there was a lack of structure, there was lack of direction, really not a lot of systems in place that allowed for academic excellence to flourish. And that's pretty much the way you could characterize it a few years ago. When you juxtapose it to what it's like now, it's very, very different. We have a lot of structure now with our teachers, with our students, our expectations, a lot of systems in place. Because you can dream big and say, inspire students, but if you don't have the systems in place to support particular endeavors that you want students to reach, you'll never reach your destination. So that's how Pacific is a little different now. And then we have a vision that we've been working for collectively as a staff and students. And as a community, really, that's really helping propel our school in the right direction.
And you've done that within the school structure. You haven't had to break out of the mold and go into a charter. In fact, if I understand right, a couple of years ago, Pacific was slated to become a charter.
That's correct.
What happened?
Well, what happened is, I'm not exactly sure. I don't have all the facts of what happened. But there was a plan afoot to make it a charter. I believe it had to do with the SIG application that they sent to the state. And I think the district opted to submit it as a transformation school. And in doing so, that took the charter classification out of play, is what it did.
Charters are all the rage.
Yeah.
People today are saying, we need innovation. The structure of our traditional schools is too bureaucratic, and the only way we're going to get that innovation and modern learning systems in place is to throw out the school system and make them charters.
That's really interesting, Roger. It really is. Charter in and of itself do not mean success, and I think the public doesn't always understand that. Once you put a label on something and say it's now a charter, unless you change what's going on inside, that in and of itself is not going to change the system. The other danger with charter schools is that you have more local control, which can be good or bad. So if you put local control in the hands of some people that may not know exactly what they're doing, that can be very dangerous as well. The flexibility is obviously very, very welcome. What's very interesting to me is if you look at the facts nationwide and you compare pound for pound, the charters as a group and public schools as a group, public schools are still outperforming charter schools for the most part. Especially if we want to talk about the area that we serve as students. In our area here in the Inland Empire, the public high schools are outperforming the charter schools. I mean, it's a fact. So it's kind of interesting. It just depends on who you talk to.
I know some charter schools can be good, but I think that it's important that perhaps we disabuse the general public perception that traditional schools are like Lean on Me with Morgan Freeman. You walk in and it's chaos, but a charter is an absolute technology haven in the 20th century, you know, or 21st century. They'll walk in and it'll be very sophisticated with every student being attentive. That isn't necessarily borne out, as you said. Some of the traditional schools outperform. And I think part of the evidence of that is how many programs you have, even at Pacific High, for the support of the students. You have a lot of programs in place. You have things like SLC. Tell me about SLC.
The SLC is a great program to our students. Basically, the SLC stands for Small Learning Community. The idea behind the SLC is that if you create small communities within the school with a counselor, a group of teachers, a group of students, even an administrator in charge of that, you can give them much more individualized attention that students need. We know, it's not a secret, that part of the reason that students get lost in high school, it's hard to navigate when you have these huge schools, 3,000 students, 4,000 students. We're about 2,100, which is still a very large school, and students get lost. So when you have an individualized group, a small learning community, you can give them much more attention and be much more individualized to what the students' needs are. And we do have that at Pacific. It's been part of our success. It's definitely been a contributor, and that's what an SLC basically is.
So how does that differentiate itself from AVID, the AVID program?
Well, AVID functions within the SLC. AVID is essentially a program that's, it stands for, first of all, the acronym. It's Advancement Via Individual Determination. It targets students who, on exams that they've taken through school and past performance, have proven that they have the aptitude to go to college, but they've also don't have a pedigree for college. Their parents may not have gone to college. These can be first generation college going students.
How important is that?
It's extremely important. It's extremely important because if these students don't have a reference point per se at home to sit down and just have a conversation about college with a parent, an older sibling, it makes it very, very difficult because the only information they're getting about college is perception on television, or information they may be getting at school or may not be getting at school. When you place that next to a student who may have a different background, whose parents maybe are college educated, even if they didn't graduate but have had the college experience, they can have these dialogues at home. So if they're not getting it at home, I think the responsibility is for the schools to bring it to the students and to create programs to recognize that particular need and do it on campus for those students. And that's what AVID really is. It's a program intended to promote the college going rate for students.
And has it been successful?
It's been incredibly successful. At Pacific, actually, we are a national demonstration school.
And what does that mean?
A national demonstration school is that the powers that be, including the AVID Regional Center, a visiting committee, visits our school. They look at our programs. They look at are we meeting its intended outcomes? Is the structure there? Is the support system there? Are students achieving? And based on what they see, they give you a national demonstration status. It's huge for our school, given the fact that there's only 120 schools with such a distinction throughout the United States.
120?
Only 100 in Pacific.
In the entire United States?
That is correct. Yeah, and Pacific is one of them. So we frequently have teams, other sites that want to model our program, come and visit our school because we are a national demonstration. We demonstrate what it's supposed to look like. They come to the campus and they emulate that back when they go to their own site. So we're very proud that Pacific is a springboard, so to speak, to other communities, other schools, to have them launch their programs.
And yet Pacific is perceived as a challenged school.
It is, but what's interesting, Roger, is you know, reputations are hard to shake off. They really, really are. Pacific is actually a very, very good school, and obviously the principal's going to say that, but if you were to talk to students, parents, the community, teachers, it's a very, very good school. High functioning, a great direction, as the charts at the beginning of the show clearly exemplified. But it's a reputation, and it's sad because when you have a reputation that's from years ago, it's really hard to shake off. And it hurts us sometimes because we have students, for example, that are in our zone, in our area, that's scheduled to go to Pacific. Students that are well prepared at grade level that can offer something to Pacific. And oftentimes, not all the time, but occasionally, you have a parent who's very trepidatious about bringing the student to our school. And that hurts us. That hurts us because when you're losing the best students, or students that have something to offer to the culture of the school, the student body, the intelligentsia, if you will, it hurts us. And so that's all driven by reputation. But I believe it's starting to change. I do think that's what's happening, and we're very hopeful that it'll continue to evolve.
Okay. We looked at the charts, and it mentioned API, and you talked a little bit about what API is. That's the tests that occur at, you said 10th, 11th, and 12th grade?
9th, 10th, and 11th.
All the way through high school?
Pretty much.
Except for senior year. And what we saw there was year-over-year improvements. So is it fair to say that a few years ago, some of the reputation of Pacific was earned?
It depends on what the reputation, how we earned it, or what they were looking for. If you look at other schools, though, for similar years, they were really only a few points away from us. So it really begs the question. If Pacific was within 10 points of every other school, why didn't the other schools earn the reputation, but Pacific did?
Yes, okay.
So
I'm going to recap for a moment. In 07-08, you had an overall score of 578, 578.
Correct.
But this last year, you had 645.
Correct.
Now that's a dramatic improvement over this short 3-year window.
It is, it is. We targeted that, we focused on developing our students, we examined where our weaknesses were, and focused on those in order to reach the levels that we wanted to. Last year in particular, we were very, very proud. We had a 29-point gain in just 1 year. And that represented, Roger, I don't know if you were aware of this or not, but it represented the largest growth of any high school in San Bernardino City last year. And we were very, very proud of that. It's a testament to the good things that our students are doing.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
So, what I want to do is take a moment and let our viewers know that at this program, you can certainly call. We're live. So we'd love to hear you call us, or you can actually tweet us. You can tweet directly to us at PluggedInland, or you can go to the hashtag KVCR, and you just add that to your tweet, and we'll see it, and we'll ask your question for you on the air. Or you can go to pluggedinland.org and send us an email right from the website. So we've talked about some of these gains. What are some of the procedures that you've implemented to affect this kind of improvement?
Wow, that's a big question.
And it's loaded, I think, because people perceive that our school system is broken. And I'm not necessarily disputing that, but I am taking this opportunity to ask you, who you've been at the head of a school that has seen improvements happen within the school structure. Why were you successful, and how can other schools do this? Yeah,
that's a fair enough question. Well, I think, again, that's a question that has many, many avenues. We've done a lot. I think the main thing is focus, is the first thing. Focus. What is the focus? And bringing, calibrating the teachers, the students, administration even, support staff, which people don't think about often. So the first thing is, what is our goal? What do we want to achieve? So developing a vision and a mission for our school. So the first thing is keeping that focus. The next thing is sharing that plan with all the stakeholders, including the parents, so everybody knows what the play is. If you're an NFL quarterback and you're going to hike the ball, I really hope that the running back and the receivers and the linemen all know that what the play is going to be, because if they're all running in different directions, even if you have very skilled people, very skilled teachers, if I can borrow the analogy, if you're not going in the same direction and not doing the same things, then you may not reach your intended target. So focus was the biggest thing. Accountability was another one. Accountability across the board, including myself as the principal. A leader has to make sure that they carry through on what they're going to do. So doing that all across the board, accountability with our students, accountability with our parents in terms of, I challenged them at one of the first meetings of the year. Are you making sure that your student has a quiet place to study? Are you checking what the homework is? And are you verifying after Johnny says, well, I already finished it? But are you saying, well, can you show it to me? Are you monitoring TV time, computer time? Because that, I can't control what goes on at home. We can't do it. Accountability with the teachers. Do they teach from bell to bell? Do we not waste a single minute of instruction? Are our lesson plans well developed? Do we as an administration help them develop the lesson plans if there's a weakness? So it's really been accountability, focus, and then just inspiring each other, inspiring students, inspiring us, teachers inspiring me, and vice versa, to succeed and to make people take notice that when you have a group of professionals trying to reach a particular goal and they develop a plan, that you can actually reach it. So that's really been part of what we've done. There's been a lot of other structures as well, but we would need 3 hours to go over everything we've done.
We have talked a lot in the nation about testing and teacher accountability. You've mentioned so many dimensions that don't fall within the typical test scores are the way in which we measure teachers. But in fact, out there, I think in the public, that is the way that we see us implementing teacher accountability. And it's because if the teachers can achieve a year-over-year test increase from the students, it's a good teacher. And if they cannot, it's not a good teacher. Is that fair?
Not 100%, it's not fair, no. We do need accountability, so I'll go on the record and say that accountability is needed for every industry, not just education. We need accountability to ensure that what we're paying for, in this case the taxpayer dollars, that we're getting a good return. And when you look at our children, I mean, what is the more important than our kids? It's the future of society. So I think accountability is good. Should we measure a teacher 100% solely based on test scores? No, I don't think we should. I don't think we should. There's a lot of other factors that affect learning, a lot of other factors that are outside of the control of the teacher and outside of the classroom that the teacher couldn't, in fairness, be expected to control that affect the achievement of a student.
Well, talk about some of those if you can.
Yeah.
Enumerate them, because I think that's where most of the public doesn't have firsthand experience. All of us have kids, most of us have kids. I have a high school age child now, and so I get to see some of this, but I'm not on campus enough. So, and you are. So enumerate some of those dimensions that cause teachers to not be able to affect dramatic increases when the teacher is a professional and working very hard to do just that.
Because there are challenges that teachers face. So one of the problems, for example, is you have to remember when we have students come to our campus, they all have a story that they bring with them. Every single student. Over the course of 4 years or 3 years that you spend with a student, you get to know them a little bit better, and you'll understand. We understand as teachers, as educators. But you know, economics sadly, it plays a role. It's not the end-all be-all, but it is. There is a relationship there. We have some students. We've had some on our campus that can't make it to school on time, and not because they don't want to, not because they're being outwardly defiant, or don't believe in education or even their futures, but because their parents leave for work at 5 because they have to do it, and they've got younger siblings at home that they have to get ready to go to school. Oftentimes walking kids to elementary schools, which around in our area starts at 9 o'clock. So if you look at that, our day starts at 7:30, and if a student has to stick around the house till 9 to get their brother and sister to school, then that means they're going to make it on our campus at 9:30 the earliest, and that affects that. So those are some of the challenges. We're also assuming that every student comes from a 2-parent home, and that's not always true. There are students, we have a homeless population, not a big one, but I think every school, in our area anyways, our community struggles with that. And there's challenges that are unique to those situations that a teacher couldn't really control. Our job as educators, Roger, if you would allow me, I think is to get to know our students, get to know them, find out what those issues are, and develop programs or be flexible enough to help them achieve and still be sensitive to their needs. We did have a student, I don't want to belabor the point if you give me one more minute, that couldn't get to school on time till second period. So they were missing school, failing the first period class just because of absenteeism. So we shifted the schedule for that student to go to 10th class from 2nd to 7th. We just shifted it essentially, and it took care of that particular problem. So you just have to really understand your students, understand your population, take the time to do so, and then figure out what you can do to support those particular students.
Okay, Tex, we have an email I'd like to go to. A question came in. Bob Jones of Arcadia said, children seem to be so involved in video games and music and other distractions. Do you think the focus of our youth overall in general has changed, and can we refocus it back to academia?
I don't know if it's changed, because I remember playing Atari, and I just dated myself. You know, when I was a kid, you know, I liked school too, but we played our games as well. I think schools are competing with much more now. I think that's a more accurate statement. I don't know that the students' focus has changed, because students just deal with the world around them. But the stimuli around them, the things that they have that catch their interest now, is very different than the ones that were when I was a kid. When I was a student, they didn't have internet. you know, so that wasn't an option for me. If internet had been around, it distracted me a little bit more, or maybe more evolved video games, then maybe that would have taken more time. But I think society has changed, and we have to remember, Roger, that as society changes, those have ripples into academia and into the school place and everything that we do. So I don't know that their focus has changed, but it's very, very competitive now for...
Tex, let's examine that just a little more when we come back. Right now, I'd like to tell our audience how they can get their voice heard, just like Bob Jones from Arcadia. Plugged Inland represents KVCR's continuing interest in focusing on important issues in the inland area. Supported by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, we're looking into innovations and solutions in education as part of the American Graduate Let's Make It Happen. And you can help us make it happen. Call us anytime during the show at 866-367-5827. Or you can send questions or comments right from our website at pluggedinland.org. Or you can email us questions and comments to questions@pluggedinland.org. And you can tweet us at #KVCR. Tex, you were talking a moment ago about the distractions and the stimuli that kids have now, and the internet that you didn't have and I didn't have. It's probably a good thing, though. Don't you think that kids have access to so much information?
It is.
Well, the question now is, since they can access all that information at will, why aren't we focusing more just on science and math? You know, a lot of argument now is about teaching to the test, and as if that's a pejorative, as if that's a bad thing to do. And other people are saying, well, no, those are the things we need our kids to learn. They can look up history, so why not just teach science and math only?
Because I think you have to focus on the evolution of a person, of a student. You have to focus on the entire individual in every facet of what they do. With STEM, you may be familiar with STEM. That's kind of the latest craze right now.
No, I don't know. Explain, please.
It's an emphasis. A lot of schools are doing this on science, technology, and mathematics, engineering, basically. There is a big push for that. I know the Gates Foundation is pushing for that as well. It's part of their mantra. That's important to be able to compete on a global level with other countries. So there is a value for that. But you have to remember, too, it's important to teach the students morals, ethics, and a lot of that comes through English, through literature, through the arts. So I think got to keep thinking Frankenstein for some reason. When you just think of science, if it's just science or numbers alone or quantifiable endeavors without other reflection that affect the soul as you read and you learn more about different opinions, different perspectives, I think we're doing our students a disfavor and really kind of producing an incomplete student. And so we want to focus on the whole student, and I think the other subjects are important too. Our history, social studies would be another example.
Okay. Yeah. Tex, that was a great answer, and I just want to let everybody know I had never asked that question before. I thought your answer was very good. So we're going to take a call, and then I want to get to this idea of rounding out the individual and talk about budget cuts and how that's eviscerated at many schools, a lot of these programs that would help. And we'll talk about that at Pacific. Right now, let's go out to Lynn in Colton. Hi, Lynn. What's your question?
Hello. I'm curious about what it's actually like for the students in the school. Like, for instance, how many students to a classroom today? And I've heard there's so many extracurricular activities that have been cut because of budgets. And I'd like to know what this particular principal is doing, like to introduce some activities back for the students, like music, art, and so forth.
Thank you, Lynn. Tex, there's actually several questions embedded in there. First, we'll talk about teacher-student ratio. Everybody talks about class size, and everybody talks about that ratio. How important is it?
It's extremely important. I'm glad the caller actually brought it up. I think it's Lynn. Thank you, Lynn. It's really important. At Pacific, again, I hate to keep coming back, but I have to. At Pacific, we actually have a QIA grant, and part of the grant...
You'll have to stop there. What is QIA?
Quality Investment Education Act. And what that, one of our parameters for that is that no core class should be larger than 27 students to one teacher. I'm proud to say that the last 3-4 years at Pacific, we have no core class that's over 27 students for one particular teacher. So that
I happen to know that's actually a very favorable ratio.
It's extremely favorable because it gives the students the individual attention and the teacher, more importantly, the ability to check for understanding and ensure that the students are actually learning. When it's 40-1, the teacher can still be giving out the lesson, covering concepts to the masses. But when it comes to working with individual students one-on-one to support what their needs are, it makes it very difficult when you have 40-1 versus 27-1. Much more manageable.
Sure. So let's get to another aspect of Lynn's question, and that was cutting the programs like art and music. And that actually ties into what I wanted to talk to you about. You're talking about rounding out the student.
Sure.
But as I understand it, Pacific actually has or is investing in their arts and music programs.
We're trying to bolster them. Part of the reason is if you look at any evolved society, throughout history, they have an appreciation for the arts. You can look at Italy with the opera, the Renaissance period, classic 4th century Greece in the flourishing of the arts. So we believe that the arts, again, kind of linked to my earlier answer, is very, very important in the evolution of an evolved mind, an evolved individual, and the arts play into that. So we're going in the direction of bolstering that. We opened up a piano lab a few years back. Next year we're looking to add a few more sections of more artistic, possibly even a dance class that we've already been talking about. And it gives students a sense of self, a sense of worth, in a different outlet that's not just always academic, and lets them know there's worth in society and pursuits that they can also go after besides just your basic pencil and paper subjects.
So Tex, how would you answer somebody that says, like you said, STEM, that the Chinese are going to beat us and the Asian countries are more rigorous with their math and science curriculum, and eventually we will fall behind into a second world nation because we're focusing on art and music and other things instead of the hardcore technology curriculum?
Well, I would disagree. I think one of the strengths of our country, if I'm allowed to say, in my assessment, is that we offer a variety of things for our students. I think we are, as a country, being very responsible and pursuing a lot of the STEM endeavors because we need people to do that. And a lot of students do. A lot of students will continue to do that. So I don't really see us falling behind on that. But part of what this country was built is it's built on choice and freedom, and you get to choose things. So to just cut out certain things because we're competing with India or the Chinese is doing a disfavor to our lifestyle and our way of life and what we do things. We do some wonderful things here in America that aren't measurable always, by did we produce a bridge, or there's other things that we offer as well that are unique to us in our lifestyle, and I think we need to be proud of that. So I don't think we're going to lose that race. I don't see us really losing that race. It just depends on your perspective, really.
Okay, you talked about cuts, and there's certainly budget issues afoot. This is a tough recession for schools. About 3 years ago, a lot of news was about the state defaulting on the payments to schools and all of the pink slips that went out to teachers. And as I understand it, there was a 2-year bridge following that first year. There was a 2-year bridge where federal funds helped augment California funds, and now those have run out, and this year is an especially critical year once again for schools.
I think it's sad, and I think anytime when you look at a complete society, you look at our society, education is the cornerstone of preparing our students for the future and to keep our country going. So anytime you take dollars away from those things, you're really hurting. And I'm not just talking about Pacific now, we're talking about the global picture, the national picture. You really are hurting our ability for our students to survive. So yeah, those are issues. They're very real issues. We're seeing a big budget cut this year in our district, throughout districts, throughout California.
I understand San Bernardino is facing a $25 million budget.
And that's a best case scenario, Roger. That's a best case scenario.
That's a best case deficit scenario.
That is correct. That's the good one if the governor's initiative doesn't pass in November, I believe.
And this is an initiative that will be on voter ballots when we go and elect the president and all the other elected officials. There will be an option there for an initiative, and I believe it is a small increase for a period of time in our local taxes to help augment the budget for schools, to keep it where it is now and to prevent further losses.
That's exactly what it is.
What happens if it doesn't pass?
If it doesn't pass, then the $25 million scenario, which is already an astounding number, it's an incredible number, then if I'm not mistaken, in our district at least, balloons to $49 million deficit now. So the district has made tremendous cuts for next year, at least the plan that was introduced and approved by the board. It's already very devastating to us. I can't imagine what it would look like.
Tex, I'm actually a little dumbfounded at the number here.
Yeah.
Just to get this clear, we're talking about cutting 25 in a best case and 49 perhaps in a worst case from a budget that's already been cut. I mean, it's not like we were writing on high-fat budgets these past few years and now we have to tighten the belt a little. Yeah. We've already cut to the bone, so now you're actually going to be digging into the marrow. It
is. It's very, very lean. We're losing a lot of support personnel, I think, throughout the state, throughout the district and different districts. And we're going to feel that impact with students because it'll be less resources to provide for our students. And it's a shame. But we at the schools try to look for creative ways to get around it. But we're being asked to do more and more every year. And you know, it gets tougher and tougher.
So what's the correlation between the funding of a school and its high school graduation rate?
Let me make sure I understand your question. So you're asking me if...
The premise I'm asking is a better funded school will have a higher graduation rate, true or false?
I think neither. I don't think it's dialectic. I believe it depends. Remember, every school's individual, very different, depending on what the school's doing. But there's a correlation. I don't think there's a direct relationship per se, but there will be a correlation, obviously, because services will suffer. So there will be a correlation between schools that are underfunded and then eventually the graduation rate. I don't know that it's dollar for dollar or there's an exact dollar per student ratio, but yeah, it will negatively affect not only the graduation rate, a lot of the programs that the schools offer.
This is something actually that I think a lot of people don't realize the impact on America. Let me just throw out some numbers. 1 million students don't graduate a year, and that means 1 out of 4 kids in high school are not going to get a diploma.
Yeah,
that's a huge number.
It's huge.
It's gotten better over the past 9 years. We've gone from 72% graduation rate overall to a 75% graduation rate. That still leaves 1 out of 4 students without a high school diploma. And some people say in the Inland Empire it's even higher. It's 1 out of 3. But that's qualified. Talk about move-outs and some of the problems tracking move-outs.
Yeah, well, yeah, the move-outs is an issue. The state has not developed yet a system to tag students and to follow them where they go. So if you have a student leaving your site and doesn't report where it's at, then you lose tracking of that particular student. Oftentimes they are picked up at other districts, maybe even up, serious distance in the state, but they won't catch that student, and so it gets reported as a dropout.
When in fact the student may in fact be enrolled somewhere and graduating.
That is correct.
Do you think that's pervasive and that explains a lot of the numbers, or do you think that's just a portion?
I think it's a portion. It's a portion. I think it's unfair to say that that's the numbers are that skewed. There's definitely I think a need for a tracking system for students. It sounds so bad, but just be able to track them with a global number, so when they go to different places they can be picked up, as opposed to a local number that we currently give at the schools. That's part of the problem. The other thing is the economy. I mean, Roger, we have to look at it. Look what's going on with the home situation. Look what's going on throughout the nation, and those have effects on families. They have effects, I think, for students that are developing. I mean, they're not adults yet to have that kind of a stress. Some may have to work. I know we have some students, we've had some in the past, that have to work after school. As soon as they turn 16 and they're eligible to work, they get that work permit.
This isn't for iTunes money. You're talking now about them actually helping with the economy of the household.
Yes, and it's sad. It's sad because income that many students of a different background enjoy, where they can, it's disposable income. You get a job at the mall to buy your iTunes or a pair of sneakers. That's not the case anymore. A lot of students actually have to work for the family unit to help out, and obviously that's going to affect what's going on in school and how much time they have to their studies.
I want to circle back to the cost to all of us nationally and in California of the dropout rate. It doesn't just affect them, but first I'm going to go. We have another email. This question is from Alex Reyes of Compton. My son thinks he's going to be the next Lil Wayne or Michael Jordan. I love this question. Thanks, Alex. And doesn't see how algebra and physics apply to his future. His grades are slipping. Grounding and punishment don't seem to motivate him. What do I do?
Yeah, that's a boy. if I had the answer to that, I'd be a millionaire. But
I mean, do you see that? Do you see people who say, I don't need to know this because I'm just going to, do something, I'm going to be a sports star?
We see some, but it's not the pervasive attitude from teenagers. I want to give teenagers a little credit. We see some, that exist, but it's not the predominant. If you take 99 students that I'm exposed to, just as a percentage, every day, I'd say maybe one student would make that statement. The majority don't. The majority of students understand. I think in education and through parents and different, we've made a pretty good job of showing students why it's important for their futures. There is, obviously, I think you know this, our viewers know this, there is a relationship between the educational level that you obtain and the level, the type of life that you enjoy down the road. And it doesn't mean you have to be a rapper or a superstar or a music star or a pop star. There just is a correlation between the level of education. So I think there is some of that. I would say that the caller, the email, sit down with your student and get to know them. That's the first thing. Just have a talk. Share with them the data. Share with them that the possibility of him becoming a rapper, not to kill the dream, by the way, but the possibility of becoming a superstar, when you look at the percentages, is very, very minute. So the student can still pursue it, but have a backup plan. And that's probably, to answer the viewer's concern, that's probably what I would do. I'd split the difference with the student and say, I will support you in your road, because I think we as parents need to also support our students' dreams, our children. But say the trade-off would be that you do this as a backup plan, because sometimes that backup plan may become the primary plan.
All right, I'm going to take a moment and tell our viewers, get your voice heard. Go ahead and email us or go to our website, pluggedinland.org, where you can send us an email right from the website, or from your phone or smartphone or tablet, give us a tweet at #KVCR. Okay, Tex, you mentioned how each of these students that graduate have the perspective of a better lifestyle. But that better lifestyle actually trickles down into the state coffers in the form of higher tax revenue and in the form of less subsistence that we, the state, has to pay for.
That's correct.
And according to statistics, every student that drops out costs the state, over the lifetime of the student, $200,000 in lost revenue. That's the potential that student could have earned and the taxes that we would see from it versus what they actually earn, or the fact that we have to outlay help to them because they're not a high school graduate.
That is correct.
And that's one. I mean, nationally we're talking 1 million students times $200,000.
Sure. That's a very scary number.
And that's actual revenue potential loss. That doesn't count the GDP impact of less productivity in the nation as a whole.
Or the value of life and their perspective, what they add to the human condition. It doesn't include that either. What kind of citizen are they going to be, So you're right, it is a big problem. I think my perspective is, and I would urge those watching, that we support the tax referendum for a few reasons. We either pay a small fee now to educate our students and develop the person the way they need to be, or we're going to pay dearly and probably tenfold down the road in many different ways if we don't support our schools and our educational systems. And that's why I think it's important that we as taxpayers do everything we can to support education.
So let's use a few minutes to talk about some of the programs at Pacific. You have the lifeboat system.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, we're very proud of that one. We started that program last year. What the lifeboat program is, lifeboat obviously saves lives. We are the pirates, that's our mascot, so we kind of stay with the nautical theme. What the lifeboat program does is it's a program where we have our seniors, an upperclassman is a better word, you can have some juniors as well, who are at grade level, who are achieving, are not deficient credits. And what they do is we pick a period or two for them depending on what their schedule allows. And they go into lower level classes in Algebra 1 and English 1 class. They go in there and they help the teacher during the independent practice portion of the class where the students are basically working. They monitor the room and help their students. So it's more of a mentoring program, a formalized, systemized program where our students are helping other students. You hear that all the time about mentoring, but not a lot of schools are doing it. So that's what we developed last year, and we're getting good results from it. Yeah, and it also brings the students together. That schism that exists between upperclassmen and lowerclassmen, it gets erased a little bit because of the interaction between students.
So what's Pirates on the Plank?
Pirates on the Plank, Pirates on the Plank is our credit recovery program. We call it the POP program. and it's intended to help the pirates, our students, if you will. It's kind of a play on words, that are on the plank and are in danger of falling off the ship into troubled waters. So it's a recovery program that is computer-based, part of it. It's a 3-part program. So if students need credits, they can go into the computer lab, make up a class, and do it that way through the computer. We also have an independent studies program that goes with it as well. A student may not want to work on the computer, but they can do the independent studies program portion of it. Or we can do supervised studies where they work with a teacher kind of on the side, one-on-one. Teacher assigns, the student brings the work back, and after a certain amount of work is completed, which would be the equivalent of a class, the student gets credit. So it's kind of a 3-fold program to attack students who are lacking credits. And it's working pretty good for us at Pacific. In fact, so good that there are 2 continuation schools in the city of San Bernardino, as I think you know. We don't refer that many students as much anymore. We've come to rely less and less on those continuation schools because we're kind of taking care of our own here at the site level. And so that's what Pirates on the Plank is.
And what's the difference from a student perspective of transferring to a continuation school versus being able to be mentored and brought forward with the proper credits within the high school that they're matriculated at?
I think the pride is the biggest thing. You hear a lot of students that want to graduate from the school that they started, a comprehensive high school. The continuation schools are an alternative model of delivery of services for students. Traditionally, they don't have a football team. They don't have all the activities that a full functioning high school would have. So I think it's the pride. A lot of students being able to recover credits on site and the fact that they can walk during graduation with their peers whom they've been with, and sometimes since infancy, since grade school, they've been traveling together. The pride that they get to walk and they finished it at their site, I think is the biggest difference, because the continuation schools also have quality programs, but it's a potpourri of different students from different places. So if they have a graduation, you're going to have maybe 2 from the same school, 2 from another. So I think that the pride that comes with it, and letting a student know that they can begin something and see it to fruition at their campus, I think is the biggest, gain that students get out of that.
So would you say, we've talked about Pacific's API increasing year over year. What about the graduation rate?
Graduation rate's on the rise as well. We'd like it to move a little faster, but we're looking at about 2 or 3 percentage points a year that we've been making. Last year, I think we had 46 more graduates than the year before. And the year before that, we had 40 more graduates than the year before. So the graduation rate is increasing. We'd like to have it at 100%. We're not quite there yet, but I think if we keep doing the things we're doing, we'll eventually reach it.
I have a question.
Sure.
Marie, this is actually a viewer question. Marie from Rialto. Thanks for watching the show and getting us your question. This is a question directed to you, Tex.
Oh, wow.
Personally. How do you plan to continue the success at Pacific, and is there a lot of pressure being a role model for these students?
No, because you should be a role model anyway. It's the right thing to do. I mean, I got into education mainly because school was pretty easy for me. I mean, if truth be told, I just didn't struggle too much with school. I understood concepts. And I didn't get in to be a principal. I got in to teach. I figured that I could, because I understood school pretty well on concepts, it would be easy for me to show other students, oh God, if someone a little younger would be able to connect with them and show them and demystify how scary these things really aren't, we'd help a lot of students. So I don't think it's hard to be a role model. I think it's what, as you progress in age and time, it's what you need to do for our youth. I enjoy being the role model. I enjoy giving them other options and for them to see the way a young man should act, the way we should be emulating, helping others, so they can do it themselves as well. But to answer the first part of the question, how do I keep to continue it? Basically, just keep targeting what our weaknesses are. This year, we'll be testing in 2 weeks pretty soon. We'll get our API results in August. I hope they're very favorable. I think they're going to move up, but we're probably not going to reach 100% of the students. So then my job as a leader would be to look at what did we miss? Who wasn't serviced? And then you go back to the drawing board, and next year we make it that much better.
Okay, we have another question. Has there been a trend for teachers to have students do most, if not all, the homework during class time, or in this case, assign it during class time, as opposed to taking it home?
That hasn't been my experience. So my experience has been no, if I were to answer it. That has not been my experience. I don't know if on a national level there may be a different trend or a different site. No, we find our teachers, our philosophy actually at Pacific, and part of the success has been that when you've only have students for 50 minutes, think about that. If I only have you 50 minutes and you have me as a resource and I'm the expert in science or biology, you need to make use of me during those 50 minutes. If you're having a conversation with the homework That's batting practice. That's stuff that you do away from the site, from the school. That's the student's responsibility. So at Pacific, that's not what we do. I don't notice that trend. I see the teachers basically giving instruction from the time the student comes in and working with those students, interacting until the bell rings.
Tell me a little bit about Pacific's demographics. Who are your students?
Our students were predominantly Latino. We're about, I think it's 75% Latino, 16%, 17% African American. It fluctuates from year to year, but they're pretty steady. 10% white, and that's pretty much compromises a big group. Beyond that, I think what's a more startling figure is that we're about 89%, almost 90% free and reduced lunch. And I think that tells a bigger story than the actual ethnic group of our students. We have very, very good students. I want our viewers to know that. Oftentimes when you have low socioeconomic, like 90% free and reduced, people think it's gangsters, thugs. No, we have very, very nice students. They're just marginalized financially. They didn't, they come from situations that are tough economically, but they're, for the most part, very, very good students. They want the same dreams and aspirations and futures that other students from other affluent areas want as well.
I have another question. This one's emailed from our web. Thank you. Donald from Arrowhead. If your child has already dropped out, what can they do to re-enroll in high school?
Oh, that's a great question. The first thing I would do, Donald, is go see the school that the student belongs to, the high school. So find out what school that is. Go talk to the principal. Go talk to the administrator. Most schools have a plan to either get them back on that particular campus. If the student is far too behind, there's alternative programs like the ones I just mentioned. A lot of schools have very creative programs. There are also adult ed is an option depending on the age of the student, where they can continue their education there. It could be a continuation school. But I think the first action the parents should take, go to the home school of that child, take the student with you, let them know you're interested in re-enrolling them, you want to complete, and they'll guide you on the site.
You mentioned, Tex, about the Latino base you have. Does that affect, first, the proficiency in English scores that you get year to year?
I don't think so. It's tempting to say yes because of the language barrier. It's so easy to just say, well, yeah, it affects it a little bit, but not too much. There is an effect. Only given the fact that if you consider what they go home to, if their parents, for example, are Spanish speakers, and they're not very well versed in English, then obviously the vocabulary that they're learning isn't at the academic level. It's not what we would expect. So that would affect them there. But schools do a good job at making up that deficit. Again, going back to why we need English, social studies, they do a pretty good job. We have a campaign that we've been using for years where we do the word of the day. And we do it over and over in every classroom. And students are learning those vocabularies. So it is a challenge. It is a challenge. But not one that we can't overcome.
What is dual immersion?
Dual immersion, we don't offer at Pacific, but dual immersion, to answer your question, is a program where you have a student go to a site, a school, and they get, depending on the model, it could be a 50% model, 50-50, it could be 80-20, every school is different, and they get part of their instruction in English and part of the instruction in a different language, typically Spanish, but it doesn't have to be Spanish. The research behind that is very strong, and it reflects that students who have two languages from infancy have a major advantage in terms of their cognitive processes that go on in their mind because they can code switch. So there's a lot of research. My students, my own kids that are in grade school, they are both in dual immersion programs. And I'm happy to report that my fourth grader, Brandon, give a little shout out to him. Brandon is proficient in both English and Spanish, can read and write, can speak it at equal levels, and so there are a lot of advantages for that program.
Okay, I want to take a moment and tell our viewers how to contact the show, not just for this show, but for all of our shows coming up. Let's go ahead and hear how you can get your voice heard and help us make it happen. Plugged Inland represents KVCR's continuing interest in focusing on important issues in the inland area. Supported by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, we're looking into innovations and solutions in education as part of the American Graduate Let's Make It Happen. And you can help us make it happen. Call us anytime during the show at 866-367-5827. Or you can send questions or comments right from our website at pluggedinland.org. Or you can email us questions and comments to questions@pluggedinland.org. And you can tweet us at #KVCR. Tex, we were talking about your being the principal during this period when you've seen gains at Pacific High, but you weren't always the principal. In fact, I believe that's not been a long tenure of yours. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's my second year as principal there. I was a vice principal prior to that on that particular campus. It gave me an understanding of what was going on in the school, the student body, the teachers, the culture, if you will. And also as a vice principal was able to contribute to some of the gains that we made prior to my taking the helm through creative programs that I was allowed to implement with my boss's permission at the time.
I understand some of those were fairly aggressive within the school system, were they not? I mean, you were looking for, like you said, teacher accountability and other things.
Yeah. So your question is?
You made staff changes, did you not? You created a more cohesive team. And that's somewhat unusual for schools to make those kind of changes.
Yeah, we had to. There were some individuals, some folks there, just a small group, whose talents are better suited for other sites, like a middle school, a different type of student, depending on their skill set. And so there was a decision made to relocate some of those teachers and bring in young, kind of a new regime, if you will. Currently, we have 54 new staff members at Pacific out of about 130 teachers. And they're all fairly young in their careers, don't have a lot of bad habits, are still eager to learn, very idealistic, and want to change the world. And anytime you have that combination, that kind of thirst, coupled with a need, I mean, boy, it's the potential for some good things to happen.
So you actually have a lot of more or less fresh blood there at Pacific.
Yes, we do.
All right, I'm going to go out to a call. This is a question brought in from Maria. Can you address how AVID program changes lives?
Oh,
briefly, and I want to say that because for Maria, we're going to have somebody that is actually an AVID teacher next week. So I don't want to talk too much about AVID. Maria, you'll have to wait till next week, but just touch on it.
Just briefly, AVID will introduce a student to college and show them how they can navigate the path to be able to get to college, and that's how they can benefit from AVID.
Great. And we have a caller, Cindy from Rancho Cucamonga. What's your question, Cindy?
Yeah, I would like to know how would he keep the morale of the staff and administration up?
That's a tough one. That's always a challenge. How do you keep the morale up? One, I think being honest is the first thing, being honest. People will pick up on that as you're talking to staff members. Even if it's a negative thing, you have to tell them, hey, we need to do this a little bit differently. Listening to them is very, very important. And giving them the positives when they're there. They do a lot of wonderful things, and oftentimes it gets unnoticed. Anytime you see someone doing something positive, whether it's an administrator, a student, a staff member, and they're doing something great, I think it's important to recognize it and praise them for it. We're quick to jump when it's something we don't like, but I think we do more of that. So we try to do that as much as possible on the campus.
Let me make this analogy because we're going to have to close here in a moment, but your campus is actually closed. You funnel students, once school starts, you funnel students right through the administration building, right?
Yes, we do, on purpose.
So it's more or less like what people envision from the Lean On Me movie where you've locked all the doors except yours is fire marshal safe. Yeah,
well, I guess it's kind of like Lean On Me, but it's very different. Part of the reason that we have controlled access to our campus is one, for student safety. It used to be a very porous campus with every gate being open, and really anybody can come on any particular time. And when parents bring students to our door, we have a responsibility for their safety, so that's the main reason. And the second quick thing is to welcome them in the morning. Good morning, have a great day, and to be able to do that. So if you have a controlled access point, you're able to do that, and that's the main reason that we do that.
Tex, thank you so much. I want to thank our guest, Mr. Tex Acosta of Pacific High School, for joining us this evening here on Plugged Inland. Next week, we'll be talking about the importance of teacher-student relationships and their impact on student success. So please be sure to tune in next Friday for another live edition of Plugged Inland. Tex, great job. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Roger, for having me. I appreciate it.